So, good morning, students. We'll continue with unit number 3 and topic number 5, which is concepts, nature, and characteristics of planning, procurement and inventory control, and just in time, that is JIT manufacturing. So, the first topic is concepts of planning. Planning is the most basic and primary function of management. It is the pre-decided outline of the activities which is to be conducted in the organization. Planning is the process of deciding when, what, when, where, and how to do a certain activity before starting to work. It is an intellectual process that needs a lot of thinking before the formation of plans. Planning is to set goals and to make certain guidelines achieve the goals. Also, planning means to formulate policies, segregation of budget, that is separation of budget, future programs, etc. These are all done to make the activity successful. An organization can be successful in effective utilization of its human, financial, and material resources only when its management decides in advance their objectives and methods of achieving them. Without it, purposive and coordinated effort is not possible, and what results are chaos, confusion, and wastage of resources. Planning involves determination of objectives of the business, formation of programs and courses of action for their attainment, development of schedules and timings of action, and assignment of responsibilities for their implementation. Planning thus precedes all efforts and action as it is the plans and programs that determines the kind of decisions and activities required for the attainment of the desired goals. So planning lies at the basis of all other managerial functions, including organization, staffing, directing, and controlling. In the absence of planning, it will be impossible to decide what activities are required, how they should be combined into jobs and departments, who will be responsible for what kind of decisions and actions, and how various decisions and activities are to be coordinated. And in the absence of organizing involving the above managerial activities, that is, organizing, staffing, directing, and controlling, staffing cannot be proceeded and directing cannot be exercised. So, planning is also an essential prerequisite for the performance of control function as it provides criteria for evaluating performance. Planning thus precedes or overcomes all managerial functions. Next, nature of planning. Planning permits coordinated effort towards the attainment of predetermined objectives. It helps the manager, that is the project manager, to shape the organization's future. Thus, the planning is to provide rationality to the organization. According to Lindell or Arwick's principle of objective, all actions in the organization must be directed towards the attainment of the enterprises, that is, the organization's objectives, and a wisely conceived plan facilitates just this. Planning is a function of every manager. Every manager plans irrespective of the level at which he operates in the organization. From the managing director down to the first line supervisor, all plan in an organization, although the breadth and scope may vary with the level of the hierarchy of the project. So, planning, controlling, organizing, staffing, and directing, all these are managerial functions and these are designed to realize the organizational objectives. Planning, however, precedes all other functions. It is through planning alone that the manager decides what to do, when to do, and who will do it. So planning and control go together. No doubt planning and control are like the siamese twins, one cannot survive without the other. So however, one cannot control what is not planned without predictability. Characteristics of planning. First one, planning is looking into the future. Planning involves predetermined line of action. Planning discovers the best alternative out of available many alternatives. Planning requires considerable time for implementation. Planning is a continuous process. Planning Planning's object is to achieve predetermined objectives in a better way. Planning integrates various activities of organization. Planning is done for a specific period. Planning not only selects the objectives but also develops policies, programs, and procedures to achieve the objectives. Planning is required at all levels of management. Planning is an interdependence which coordinates the various business activities. Planning directs the members of the organization. Growth and prosperity of any organization depends upon planning. Next, procurement and inventory control. So many manufacturing companies have adopted computerized systems to control the flow of resources and inventory. Materials Requirement Planning, which is known as MRP, is one such system. MRP uses a master schedule to ensure that the materials, labor, and equipment needed for production are at the right places, in the right amounts, at the right times. So the schedule is based on forecasts of demand for the company's products. It says exactly what will be manufactured during the next few weeks or months and when the work will take place. Sophisticated computer programs coordinate all the elements of MRP. The computer comes up with material requirements by comparing production needs to the materials the company already has on hand. So orders are placed so items will be on hand when they are needed for production, while maintaining the lowest possible amount of materials and product to remain in the house. Next, just-in-time manufacturing. So that is JIT. It is a strategy that companies employ to increase the efficiency and decrease waste by receiving goods only when they are needed in the production process, thereby reducing inventory costs. So in theory, a JIT system would have parts and materials arriving on the warehouse dock at the exact moment when they are needed in the production process. To make this happen, manufacturers and suppliers must work together closely to prevent just in time from becoming just isn't there. So operations managers most accurately forecast the need for materials since even the slightest deviation can result in a slowdown of production. So RP helps ensure a smooth flow of finished products. You can give your name and enrollment ID in the attendance box, in the chat box. Thank you for this lecture.
So as part of this tutorial, we are going to look at what is project management, what is project, components of project management, project life cycle, key focus areas in project management, job roles in project management, and project management certifications. So what is project management? Now as defined in PMI's PMBOK, project management is application of knowledge, skills, tools and techniques to project activities to meet project requirements. So every project will have an objective to accomplish. Similarly, the objective of project management is to make the final deliverables in a finite time and budget. This involves having clear understanding about the deliverables of the project, required resources for the project, resource in terms of human resources, technical resources, financial resources, etc. Project manager should have a full picture of those aspects. We can call it as constraints or aspects and manage those throughout the project life cycle, for which a project manager should have a full view about a project and what is that this project has to accomplish. That objective should be clear. So, as part of project management, the six constraints which project managers should look at are scope, time, quality, cost, risk, and resources. So, each of these areas has very important role to play in project management. The clarity in scope, the clarity in terms of schedule within which the project has to be delivered, the cost, what it incurs to that particular project. Once it is finalized, one cannot vary, one cannot change without any proper approvals. Similar to that, we have quality management, which has to ensure the scope, the specifications, what are defined, project output will be accordingly achieved. Risk, every project is taken up for a specific reason by organization. So organization should assess the risk associated with the project, and similarly, as project progresses, various different risks has to be identified, like risk related to project management, risk related to technology area, risk related to resources, risk related to financial things. So broadly, risk management plays a very important role. So there will be something called contingency reserve kept for a identified risk above the cost what is estimated for various deliverables from the project. So every project require resources. Resources may be in terms of human resources, financial resources, technology resources, environmental resources. So all these resources are used to produce the output of the project. So these resources has to be managed with the sufficient optimization and standardizations required. Now let us understand the definition of a project. So what is a project? PMI defines a project as a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. The temporary nature of a project indicates that a project has a definite beginning and end. So when I say product, unique product, it means every output, it may be similar products you are producing with the same features and functionality. But the output of every project is unique because it is unique in terms of all the six constraints what we just discussed now. Now when I say product, it is very easy for us to visualize. It may be a desktop, it may be a laptop, it may be a car, it may be a machine, etc. But how do I visualize a service? Now project's output is a service. Now it's about building a capability. A project, by through a project, a capability can be built to ensure services can be provided. That's what the output of project is, service. For example, if I think about a taxi services, for providing a taxi services, I need a mobile app. I need taxi. I need a server. I need a data center. So all these are various different products and services. Here service example can be internet service. So combination of all these services and products builds the capability for an organizations who can provide the taxi services. So building that capability, we say it is an output of a particular project which is called service. Similarly, results can be improvement of something, improvement in customer satisfaction, increase in some specific objectives or specific results needs to be achieved in performance perspective. So output of every project will be unique product or a service or a result. This we need to clearly understand. So when we say there is a definite beginning and end, every project starts at a certain point in time and ends at certain point in time. So it has a definite beginning and end. That is the reason it is temporary in nature. It is not an ongoing business activity, right? So every project will have a life cycle, a beginning and end. So when it starts till end, until the result or a service or a product which comes as an output of a project life cycle is not ended. So interestingly, in a product life cycle or in a service life cycle, you come across many project life cycles. So one project life cycle means one project is initiated to introduce a product or services. Next project or initiated would be to enhance the capability of a service or a product. Next project initiated after some time is to optimize something. Similarly, at the end of the product life cycle, project is initiated to retire that product or services. So in a given product life cycle, there may be multiple project life cycle. So what is involved in the project life cycle? It involves five areas, five groups we can call it as. So initiation, planning, execution, monitoring, and closure. So when I say initiation, it's all about understanding what is project, giving the basic understanding of the project, collating the details, and having key stakeholders identified. Once that is done, one will move towards planning. So here in the initiation, it is very clearly one has to understand is project is worthwhile of doing. So one has to check the feasibility, one has to measure that particular investment is making sense, and then confirm yes, it makes sense to invest. Now next, planning. As we have a basic understanding of yes, this project has to be done, and a discussion with the key stakeholders have happened, now that moves towards planning. Now in planning, one will understand the project in entirety. If it is a waterfall approach, One has to have a clear articulation of entire project, a comprehensive details, holistic approach. Now, if you're going in a project in a agile way of approach, now in this planning, you may have a big skeleton. As you go in each of the iteration, you may go deep dive into detailed planning if it is a agile approach. So planning provides you the clear insight towards what needs to be done in this project, how it has to be done, and what are the results which can be achieved out of that particular project. So this involves making that a clear blueprint of an project objectives, what we are supposed to achieve. So this will become a reference point throughout the project lifecycle. Then execution. As you have a blueprint of the project, as the direction of that project is set, detailing of the project has been made, one will go ahead and execute the project. Execute in the sense implementation, acquiring resources and implementing it. So execution phase involves the allocation of resources and making the deliverables as required. You acquire resources, you configure a resource, you ensure right resources are acquired. If it is human resource, one has to educate that human resource with the project required knowledge or details, or one has to provide that assignment in such a way that skills of that individuals what they should have is acquired by those individuals so that deliverables can happen, and they needs to be managed. The entire team needs to be managed. For that, a clear structure has to be created. Similarly, when you do technology resource perspective, those components has to be tested, configured, then integrated, again tested for and check the performances. So collective action of this results in a deliverable during the execution. So as the deliverables are happening in the execution, it is quite obvious project manager has to monitor, review, control that particular deliverable, and also the processes, tools, resources used during the project, even those needs to be monitored so that they are complying to the defined processes. So during monitoring, there may be a deviation one can found. During monitoring, there may be the project is running the way it is required. So in this monitoring phase, it involves an action from project manager to monitor and control the work of the project. So comparing with the blueprint of plan, what is accomplished, what is created during the planning phase of this project, and as the execution happens, monitoring and control is monitoring it and checking is that activities what is being done is according to the plan or not. Similarly, the deliverables which comes as an output of a project are tested thoroughly, whether those have a specific features and functionality and are they functioning the way it is required. Now project has to be delivered to the scope what is defined, it should not go beyond that or below that. Similarly, the schedule what is made for the project, within that schedule project deliverables needs to be accomplished within the cost what is budgeted for the project. So during the project, you project manager may find there are certain deviations which are occurred, there are additional challenges which has come in. So for this reason, one has to ensure continued monitoring as the execution happens and identify those deviation and ensure whenever there is a deviation there is a correction, whenever there is an additional things coming in, that needs to be considered carefully whether that need to be involved as part of this deliverable or should be taken it separately. So this requires a lot of conversation with all the stakeholders of the project during the entire project life cycle, especially during planning, execution, monitoring and control, since they are not the one which is happening in sequence. So planning can also come back again where there is something which you may require to modify, so may require to have a change in the blueprint itself by adding that new change which is coming in. So you go back to planning. So planning, execution, monitoring and control are going hand in hand so that project deliverables are happening as needed. Similarly, all the process, work instructions, all those templates what is given are used. One is complying to those requirement. It is very important. And project is done within the scope, schedule and time and the quality metrics defined. Then as the completion of the project happens, as the monitoring and control says, yes, deliverable has happened according to the requirement, then the project moves to the closure. The closure may be closure of a specific project phase, a milestone deliverable or a phasal deliverable, or it can be a deliverable at the end of the project, which is the ultimate deliverable. So processes in closing has to be triggered whenever there is an end of the phase, whenever there is a deliverable to conclude, and also at the end of the project to conclude the entire project. So during the closure, one has to ensure capturing all the details in terms of what is accomplished against what is defined, what went wrong, what went well, what is the learning one has to take to the next level or to next phase or to the next project. And at the same time, a sign off has to be obtained formally and everything should be summarized and have a good handshake with the project stakeholder, mainly a business or customer. And also disseminating of team means you will dismantle the entire team and send them back to their specific units or specialization, and they may get assigned to new project, or if it is a functional, they can go back to their functions to do their functional activities. So that was about entire project life cycle, what happens. Now while doing this, I mentioned there are six constraints, that is scope, schedule, cost, quality, risk, and resources. So keeping these in mind, one has to ensure project is successful in all aspects. So to become successful, there are few key areas which has to be looked at. So first six key areas are scope, schedule, cost, quality, resources, and stakeholders. Now let us look at the scope. What does scope means? Scope is about what needs to be delivered. What is in scope? What is out of the scope? So this refers to all those deliverable scope, all those activity scope. Basically, we speak about two things. One is product scope and project scope. Product scope is all about ensuring the features, functionality of products are well defined and understood and signed off. And while delivering that product, that is tested against those defined features and functionalities. Whereas project scope focus on all the activities needs to be done, all those templates which has to be used, all the process which has to be complied with, all that skills which is required to be applied. So it is going as defined. So by doing this activities which is defined as part of project scope, the result, the deliverable will come out, which will be in line with the deliverables, features, and functionality, which is defined as part of product scope. It is very important to ensure entire projects happens within this particular scope. There should not be any deviations from this. Schedule perspective, for that specifications what we defined for a product and project. So these needs to be done in a specific point in time, means in a specific schedule. There will be start time, end time, right? So one has to plan how long a project would take and what are the deliverables should happen in what sequence, what activities are required to accomplish this. So all these needs to be understood. So while performing the schedule management, one has to look at a specific deliverable at a specific point in time by applying a specific set of activities required. So this will tell you the duration of the project. This will provide you the sequence of project. This will also help you to understand the dependency between one task to another task. This will also help you to understand how the deliverables happening in what sequence, which helps in prioritizing your deliverables. Third is cost. So as we know, to do any project, it is very essential to ensure project happens within that budget. So project cost is estimated initially, then that estimated cost will be checked in terms of is the assumptions, considerations are right or wrong. Is that really so much of monetary resources are required for the project? And then after understanding the justification and obtaining the clarity, budget is, I mean, monetary resources are allocated and confirmed, approved. Then it will become a budget. That will be a cost baseline. So these estimation, allocation of budget, once it happens, that will become a base, and any deviations from that cannot happen so easily. So any deviations because of additional of scope, that can be handled through change management. But idealistic scenario, the cost should not escalate or come down. Organization can also set certain tolerances at the project level, considering various different scenarios, like scenario of risks, scenario of something which deviated from the deliverable. So to what extent it can deviate, that tolerance will also be set at the economic or monetary value perspective. That is about cost. Now, quality, as we know, quality is a very important area which ensures the project is delivered in time with all the specifications defined by using all the methods, means by following all the processes, work instructions, templates, and delivering as needed, where it enables the project to monitor it easily. So basically, the requirement of compliance and standardization and optimization is to ensure everyone follows the same steps to the activity. So what quality management focus is to ensure the intended objectives of a project are achieved. Already there is a definition done in terms of various different practices or processes needs to be followed. Similarly, specification of each of the products are defined, and from that there should not be any deviation. So quality management should focus on ensuring those activities are done as defined, those deliverables are done according to the specifications what is defined. It is very important that way. So for that there is a layer of quality management, there should be a layer of quality management where auditing or control activities are initiated periodically so that any deviations can be seen easily. And remember, A project manager cannot become part of quality management. Like project manager cannot audit. Project manager should have a team or take the help of a team who can able to do. Mostly the one who is not part of the project is always better. Resources. Now, as I mentioned earlier, every project need resources. It may be human resources, it may be technology resources, it may be any other resources which are required to do the project. So organization acquires resources, configured and then deployed. For example, in a project, you acquire a server, you configure a server, you deploy a server. Technology resource. Human resource is onboarded, recruited, project induction is given. Then at the same time, the skills and capabilities of individuals are according to the requirement of project. That needs to be ensured. And what needs to be delivered and how it has to be delivered should be clear to the particular human resource. So looking at all the aspects of resources to acquire, to build and manage, it is very important to look at the resource management. So this will help in carrying out a specific task in a project in the best possible manner. So interestingly, when I say human resource, always there is a possibility that a conflict can occur. So when I say conflict of interest maybe in terms of what the individuals has to do, conflict in terms of the preferences, in terms of solutions, what they're looking at, conflict in terms of using resources, different opinions, different preferences, various reasons conflict can come across. So it is very important to project manager to understand this dynamics of human resources and manage these conflicts. Project manager cannot shy away from handling conflicts. Project manager has to hone and resolve those conflicts in the favor of project, not in the favor of any individuals. So there are various techniques to look at resolving conflicts. So that is like compromising, problem solving, smoothing, accommodating. So whichever helps for that project scenario, for the project objectives, that needs to be applied. That technique has to be taken up. So here, the resolution is not at the specific individual's preference. It is with the objective of whether projects has any impact. What kind of impact, positive or negative? If it is negative, no, that's not the direction. The direction should be ensuring project gets that value through this conflict resolution. So project manager should own it. It's an accountability of a project manager. Then as the human resources are acquired, there are 5 stages. Team dynamics are involved. So one has to bring them, then educate them about a project. As the education on the project happens, one has to go and do the job on the floor. That needs to be observed. Means one has to manage by looking at it, and any corrections needs to be done. That needs to be guided. So it is very dynamic thing when it comes to human resources. Similarly, in technology resources, standardization. There is no ambiguity as such, but right resources with the right configurations should be acquired. That is very important. The next, stakeholders. So who can be stakeholders? Every project will have a stakeholder who are internal and external to the project. So the internal stakeholders are those who are part of the project, who are part of the organization, who are part of the customer organization, or part of supplier organization, a competition to my business, means my organization's business. All this we can call it as a stakeholders. Now every stakeholders will have a specific interest, a power, an ability to influence. Now through their position, through their distance from the project, they will get impacted. At the same time, they will also impact the project. Similarly, they influence and they get influenced because of the project. So a project manager should identify all the stakeholders and understand this. What is the kind of stakeholder is this in terms of power, in terms of legitimacy, in terms of influence, in terms of impact? After understanding that, there should be a strategy for handling the stakeholders. How am I going to engage with these stakeholders? It is very important. And accordingly, the engagement should happen, and then stakeholder engagement should resolve in the favor of projects again. So if it is a customer should get the inputs required through review or periodic updates and the engagement required with the customer, so that customer is having up to date information about the project. If it is a team, continued monitoring and control and ensuring team delivers the results what is required. So focus of a stakeholder should be in such a way that your strategy should enable project to become successful and get a proper response from the stakeholder, means a supporting engagement. So next few key focus areas to mention is communication, risk, procurement, critical success factors, deliverables, and work breakdown. So this list is not exhaustive. As we deep dive into project, I think you can just keep listing the key focus areas more than this. but whatever we have indicated are the minimum which needs to be looked at. So when I say communication, communication is basically a conversation, exchange of message which happens between two entities. Now whenever we communicate, it is necessary to understand that it has to happen with two individuals or two entities. There should be sender, there should be receiver. In the absence of receiver, if sending is happening, that communication doesn't make any sense. There should be a receiver and there should be an acknowledgement from the receiver. Now, this is one of the most ignored area in many of the projects. Even the communication happens more often, more frequently. But what people face difficulty in realizing that as they communicate generally, informally, formally, they just take those for granted. Now, when you identify the stakeholder, one has to understand what is the communication requirement for those stakeholders. What is that communication? Why is that communication? What is the content of that communication? How frequently we should do that interactions or communications? Intent of that particular communication. What is the expected action or response from that communication? All this needs to be very, very clear, and this can be articulated. It has to be articulated. So when it is articulated, once there is a picture in terms of what kind of communication has to happen, it is quite obvious there should not be any deviation from the agreed communications requirements. And whenever there is a need of change to the communication requirements from the stakeholders, that needs to be updated. For this, one has to have a stakeholders identified. So stakeholder management and communication are very closely linked and associated. Engagement with the stakeholder will become successful with an effective communication approaches. Next is risk. So every project which is undertaken by organization, that will have certain amount of risk which organization will evaluate. Similarly, within the project life cycle, lot of risk comes up which would have certain impact to the project. Now, risk refers to, by definition, an uncertain event. It has an uncertainty. An event which is uncertain, and when it occurs, it will have an impact